Welcome to Insight Marketing Success, the podcast where marketing knowledge meets real-world experience, from vision to execution.
All right. Andrew, welcome to IMS. Look forward to talking to you. And please tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Yeah. So my name is Andrew Poles. I'm the founder of Andrew Poles Performance Coaching. I'm an executive coach, and I work mostly with startup founders who are founding companies for the very first time, and specifically companies that are typically venture backed or angel backed, to make sure that their personal professional growth keeps in pace with the kind of growth they want to push in their companies. Because what I find is when they don't, if the founder doesn't grow as fast as they want the company to grow, then the company's growth will stall. And what I do is I work with and I coach the founders.
Well, tell us about your educational background, how you got to this position.
I've been to two different kinds of schools. I have been to, my sort of more traditional education. And then I've also been through the School of Hard Knocks. I did both things. I went to my undergraduate school at Berkeley and the University of Arizona. Then I went to graduate school here in Austin, where I live now, where I did a PhD program in philosophy. And during that time, I started my first company. So I was in graduate school and the School of Hard Knocks at the same time. And I've started 3 companies for myself. I've run 3 multi-million-dollar companies for others. I've been coaching professionally for 22 years during that time. So I just have lots of various sources of experience and education in both coaching and business.
Wonderful. Out of those things that you mentioned, which one would you say was the most fulfilling for you personally?
Without doubt, coaching has been the most fulfilling part of my professional career. And I say that because I just believe that in my case, I was put together to do something specific here on this planet in this lifetime. And it's definitely empowering people to be able to chase after and realize the dreams that are deeply meaningful to them. And being able to participate in watching other people accomplish things that they do dream possible, but that feel out of reach is tremendously fulfilling. And coaching allows me to do that.
Fantastic. I think we share a similar path. About 10 years ago, I met somebody who I did an exercise, and she told me one of my purposes was to help people unleash their full potential. I'm with you. Okay. So when you started your career and you had your education, you started Andrew Poles Consulting. Tell us about a campaign that helped you to get many clients, or what the most successful campaign that you can think of.
Well, I'll tell you that this is kind of also speaks to something that I hear you talk to others about, which is like, talk about one of the constraints you overcame in marketing. So those two things kind of go together. I'm going to try to address both. When I started this company that I have now, Andrew Poles Performance Coaching, I had just left a 17-year stint working for one of the world's largest and probably best known personal and professional coaching programs. Had global presence, almost $100 million of revenue. I was leading some of the most senior programs for them. I was doing business consulting for them. When I left to start this business, that company tends to be very, very protective of their market share. And so early into the launching of this business, when I started putting content marketing pieces out, they sent me a letter from their outside counsel trying to get me to take down some of the content that I was posting, claiming that it violated some agreements. And even though the claims were spurious, I had to hire an attorney and go through this whole thing of defending or justifying what I was doing, which it was expensive, and they were a 300-pound gorilla. They were a 55-year-old company. I was a 3-month-old company, and so I didn't want to keep crossing swords with them. So when I launched this company, I decided, for at least the first couple of years, I wasn't going to have a website. I wasn't going to have a huge brand presence because I didn't want to keep going through that experience until I was better resourced. And so I built this whole company as a 6-figure business in about 6 weeks from nothing other than network marketing. So probably the most successful campaign I've ever had is network marketing, but it was kind of necessitated by this external constraint that I was dealing with.
Amazing. And that just confirms that's how we met, trying to reach and network with you, and that's why we're doing this. So that just confirms this works.
Yeah,
I believe in order to do that, you have to be aligned in values and don't expect much in return, but have a heart to heart and say, we're going to help each other.
Yes. Can I tell an interesting story about what you just said? Because I want to really underline that, because I think it's really important, and Some businesses just kind of lean themselves more naturally to marketing channels like, maybe thought leadership on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or, whatever, or they kind of lend themselves more to paid advertising and things of that nature. Plenty of my companies do that. But when it comes to what you just said, what I have found is that there's something that just happens in the universe, or however you want to think about that, when my intention is squarely focused on connecting with people genuinely, people who I feel an attraction to connect with, not people who would make a good client, people I'm genuinely attracted to connecting with the intention of just discovering what is it about the connection I feel that wants to get uncovered or explored or tapped into. For a while, when I decided I was done sort of like staying in the shadows, so to speak, and avoiding potentially more legal action from this company, I launched my website. I started doing lots of thought leadership. I started doing a lot of direct outreach on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And it was my first attempt, Ricardo, to try to create like a channel, a campaign, etc. And it wasn't very heartfelt. It was purely functional for me. I'm like, okay, I don't want to rely on smiling and dialing for the rest of my life. So I want a marketing channel. And so I just hired this company. This company was, they claimed to be really good at what they did, but they were not heart-centered. So they were just sort of like, hey, great to meet you. Do you want to do business? Kind of like one of those kind of just like, let's do volume. Let's see if someone will respond. And I did that for months and months, spent tens of thousands of dollars. It was not successful for me and it was not fulfilling for me. And then, I mean, financially it was successful, but not in terms of like how many clients did I wind up meeting and how did it grow my business? So then I'm like, no, forget that. I'm going to do content marketing and I'm going to put stuff out there that really reflects me. And I did that for months and months and months and months and months. But I knew that underneath that, it was like no matter what I did, even when I was sharing myself very authentically in that content, Ricardo, the underlying motivation was I want to build a channel that gets me out of the relationship marketing business. And as long and no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many times I put out what I thought was really great content, it literally led to nothing until one moment I literally had a crisis, okay? I was so frustrated. I was so done with the whole thing that I sent this message off to my marketing person. I call her my fractional CMO. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm sick of LinkedIn. I'm sick of content. I'm done. I was ready to like throw in the whole towel on the marketing thing. And shortly after I kind of blew my stack on that and then looked again, what I realized was I had gotten away from the thing that had always made me successful with marketing, which was genuine human connection, genuine human interest, genuine desire to contribute or even be contributed to. And literally the second that I saw it, that I had just been on the wrong track trying to make something functional happen in the absence of any real connection or desire to connect, I started rethinking about this thought leadership content as opposed to trying to force someone to become an inbound lead to my business, that maybe it would introduce me to interesting people. And so I just started looking on LinkedIn, which is where I had been focusing, at the people who were looking at my profile as a function of the work I was doing. And when I found someone that I was like, wow, what they are doing in the world is really interesting. It's really, I think, beneficial. I would reach out to them through a direct message and say, hey, I really like what you're doing. I'd like to learn more about it. Can we talk? And it was like, boom, 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 boom. And I just all of a sudden started having all these appointments and all these meetings with all these people. And it was like the universe finally said, okay, now you can have what you want.
Yeah.
Because you're being authentic, you're being yourself. And it was just like a flood ensued after that. And so the biggest breakthrough I've had was what you just said, which was trimming myself up, holding myself to account to the thing my business has always been about, which is human connection, contribution through being myself. And as soon as I did that, everything turned on a dime.
Yeah. And I have a similar experience and I need to share it because our relationship is because of that. I have had my company for 27 years and it was successful to the level that I wanted it to have. And then I started losing clients and then I started to do an analysis and I was in it for profit, for making money.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
and I'm getting older, and rethinking life. And I was like, no, I'm going to help people. And those who want to stick around are my employees, great. And those who want to leave, goodbye. But I'm going to help people in this process. And so in the process of thinking that, I was like, okay, I need to reach out to people who want to create a strategic business relationship.
Mm.
And when I meet them for the first time, I'm going to tell them exactly what I want. I want a relationship. We're going to help each other. If you can help me, great. If you cannot help me, I will help you. But at least I tried, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I didn't expect much from the campaign, but I'm meeting with 2 to 3 people a week, and some of them very interesting, like you.
Mm. Well, thank you.
So
That's very kind of you to say.
yeah. And so then I offered them to be in IMS. And as you and I walk this path together, I'm sure I'll get you a client or two, and we'll help each other.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So how do you approach storytelling in the process of doing your work?
My work or marketing or both?
Both.
So, in terms of how I approach my work, there's how I use storytelling to accomplish my intention in coaching others to get them where they want to go. There's how I work with them in storytelling. And then there's marketing, how I incorporate storytelling. And all three are critical. They say that a picture's worth 1,000 words and a story is worth 10,000 in terms of the impact that it has. So when it comes to coaching others, I think I use a story on almost every call that I have because I find that encapsulating some idea or some learning in a story helps people connect with it on a really human level, on a heartfelt level, as opposed to just a cognitive level or the level of understanding. So I will especially share chapters from my life where I struggled with something, failed at something, and what made the difference for me where I broke through so that people can get struggle and failure and breaking through. That's all part of the process. It's not a game of winning and winning. It's a game of winning and losing. That's the way it goes when you're really going after something. And
Yep.
so I incorporate storytelling to try to help humanize, normalize, I think, and also add real power and depth to what people are going through. When it comes to coaching them, I work directly with people on being great storytellers because my clients are almost all CEOs. And my view of that is that the primary job of a CEO is to be the CSTO. A CEO should be the chief storytelling officer of the company.
Oh,
Okay, so the job of a CEO is to create a great story for everyone to get to live in, the employees, the customers, the investors. And so to be a great CEO, you got to be a great storyteller. And if you look throughout history, the great ones all have been. Steve Jobs is a great example of this. Both times he started as the head of Apple at Pixar. So there's a lot of examples of this. So I think it's critical if you're a founder of a company or you're CEO that you be a great storyteller. And storytelling is not just about, let me tell you about the time when I was 6. It's like, what's the story of the brand? What's the story of what we're doing? Now, when it comes to marketing and my company, I use storytelling in two different ways. I do share a lot from my personal life and my personal story bank when sharing some piece of thought leadership with people. But I also really look for stories either from my clients, which I, of course, anonymize, but share so that other founders can see, the struggle is real. It's not just you. And you can actually deal with this powerfully if you think of it this way. But I also look for and really create a story bank for myself, stories of other recognizable figures, whether it's someone like Vincent Van Gogh or someone like, Steve Jobs or a current actor or whatever, where people can see themselves in that struggle and more powerfully move through what they're dealing with. So I think it's critical as a function of all of what I do.
wonderful. And I confirm, I didn't hear that term before. That's the chief storyteller. That's a wonderful
I
um
made it up. I made it up.
yeah,
So I,
yeah. Yeah, well, that I learn something every day. I like it. My wife and I we volunteer for our church and we help couples prepare to get married. And
Hmm.
so we get 1 or 2 couples per year, and it
Wow.
takes about 6 weeks to prepare them. We meet with them every other week, about 5, 6 sessions. And without a doubt, every time we ask them, what do you like the best? Is your stories,
Hmm.
because we bring real life stories to, like, well, when she was upset at me, I said this and we solved it by doing this.
Okay.
And I have the fortune to be married to an amazing person for 34 years thus far.
Wow.
And
Congratulations.
so,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
so that's going fantastic. Those little stories that connect to whatever you're talking become key.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. How do you foster creativity and collaboration with your marketing and sales team or within yourself? Because I think you have a small
Yeah.
team.
Yeah. I have a team of 5. So it's a pretty small team. First of all, when I onboard someone new, I share my story with them, and then I share the story as the chief storytelling officer. I share the story with them of the impact that we're out to make in the world of our clients. Because one of the things that's really important if you're going to be working on marketing with me in the company is you have to understand the hero's journey that our clients are on. And so I feel like it's my job to help people who are joining the team get in that world quickly and powerfully. And so I use storytelling to do that. I use storytelling to help them understand a day or a week or a year in the life of our ideal client and what they are struggling with so that when they're putting something together, they are thinking and seeing through the eyes as best they can of the person we're trying to reach and impact. I think that's probably the strongest example of that in terms of how I collaborate with people on my team. I don't know if I've answered your question, though, so tell me if I've missed something there.
No, no, that's good. Let me go with this next question. What advice would you give to a company that is struggling to differentiate themselves in the marketplace?
Okay, so let's stay on the theme you and I are on because I think that's relevant. What I tell people is the best product never wins. The best story wins. It's always the best story that wins. And so my experience is that most people I work with actually have a brand that's being built, but they have never really articulated what the brand is or what the brand story is. So even though it is there to be seen and felt by people, they, as the founders or as the team, have never articulated it clearly and well. And therefore, they can't think about how it fits in the marketplace of other people who are in the same space. So, one thing I would say is it's really important that you understand the story of your brand in your market. The second thing that I would say is, despite the fact that there's a lot of information out there on this, I don't see many people either accessing it or if they have accessed it, implementing it really powerfully. And that is that given the best story wins, I think your greatest point of leverage is not the thing you're most called to think about, which is in technology, they call it speeds and feeds. In general business thinking, they call it benefits and features. And everyone's trying to compete by having a better benefit or a better feature, or a better speed or a better feed. And although it's possible to do that for one or two players in a marketplace, it's not possible for everyone to effectively compete at that level. So the famous example of this is like, well, you have Coke, and then you have one alternative. You have Pepsi. Pepsi's not Coke, but it's a cola. And then you have the uncola. You have Sprite. So now you have Pepsi, Coke, and Sprite, right? So you got 3. And then everyone else is going to try to do what? Like be a little bit better than Coke or a little bit better than Pepsi. Like who cares? So you got to have a better story than that. So the thing that I ask people to think about, which is a much bigger lever than being a better mousetrap or, whatever,
Mhm.
is think about how you can impact the way your customer thinks about the choice of what they're going to use rather than letting them pick their own criteria for how to make the choice. And then inside of that, you just trying to look better than everyone else. That is a really weak lever to pull on. Whereas if you can think about how do I get them to think about the decision itself the way that I want them to, that's a game changer. And I think a great example of this to tell a kind of a story that's partially true and
Yes,
partially fiction, okay, is
that was going to be my question, but
yeah,
keep
yeah.
going.
Okay. So so this is my third company, as I said. My second company, I had a business partner, and she and I wanted to empower something in the domain of either public speaking or professional presenting. And we were in the beginning days of this business, and we knew we had something special because we had delivered a bunch of it and people were responding really positively to the workshops and the pricing and everything. But we hadn't yet figured out what I'm talking about here, which is this key branding differentiating message. So I started doing customer interviews. I was setting up all these appointments and I was asking people what they were looking for. And it struck me that people would say, well, I need you to work with this part of my HR department because they keep talking to executives and they don't know how to present to executives. Or I would be talking to sales and engineers, people in sales, and they're like, they don't know how to talk to this person. Or, we can't get these proposals aligned on, or whatever it was. And it struck me that everyone was thinking about what they need. Like, I need someone who can help my people learn how to talk to this person or up their executive presence or whatever. But really what they were all looking for, that they didn't know they were looking for, was how to have every single person on their team be influential with whoever they were talking to in whatever situation. Okay, that was really what they needed, and they didn't know they needed. So as I started meeting people and they started telling me about, oh, we need, you to work with our HR team talking to the executives, or we need you to, whatever, talk with the recruiter, do whatever. I would say, so it sounds like what you're saying is that you need someone to help your team learn how to influence people in this situation so that when they leave a meeting, the people on the other side of the conversation start thinking about the whole thing in a different way. They're like, yeah, that's what I need. I'm like, okay, well, so what we do is we train people in the neuroscience of influence. How do you influence people in any situation or context, regardless of your role? Is that what you're looking for? Yes, that's what I want. And everybody else, Ricardo, I swear to God, was like selling presentation skills and how to make a great deck. And we've got an AI version of how to create a great deck. It'll save you a bunch of time. And everyone was trying to differentiate on speeds and feeds. But we started thinking about what's going to change the way they think about how to make a choice. And as soon as we did that, it was like contract. We got a contract with NASA, Dell, Schwab, Epic Games. It was like boom, 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 boom. And then once we would get in, they would pass us to the next team and the next team and the next team. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. Instead of trying to be better on speeds and feeds, if you want to differentiate yourself, change the context or change the game that's getting played around how the decision gets made. That's a bigger lever.
Okay, that's an amazing story, an amazing idea, and you're making me think. So that's fantastic. All right. What advice would you give to yourself if you were to go back in time when you started your first job?
Yeah.
Green.
First job or first company?
First company. Let's start.
First company. Okay.
What advice would you give yourself?
Okay, so this is interesting because it's not going to be business advice. So this is going to be a little weird because I thought about this before, by the way. And so there were so many mistakes I made in that first business that I could go back and say, do this, don't do that, or think this way, not that way. But the truth is, when I exited when I closed down my first company after 6 years, okay, I didn't have an exit, I didn't have a sale. It felt like a failure. At the time, I was really disappointed with how it all turned out. I was like 29 when I shut down my first company. I had it from when I was 23 to when I was 29. But what I learned over the course of my life was that was just such an important failure, and leaving that business because it wasn't heartfelt anyway, and going on my path to find that was so important for me. Like, I wouldn't want that to change. I wouldn't want to take that away from myself. So the advice I would give myself actually isn't about business and what I've learned since then. It was that in my first business, every single thing felt existentially threatening. And so I made lots of sacrifices with my time, not spending time with my daughter, not spending time with my family, thinking I had to go in and I had to solve whatever crisis or whatever. And I can never get that time back. And, maybe some of the time those were maybe wise trade-offs, but most of the time they were not. And so the advice I would give myself is I would teach myself how to step back and try to see the forest, for the trees, of the larger perspective of what my life was about and what I was trying to accomplish. And without telling myself that the business was never going to go where I wanted it to go, and, without revealing anything about that, I would just try to help myself understand that nobody can set the line for you about where sacrifice stops when it comes to time for your health or your family or whatever. You have to set it. And if you don't get perspective on the bigger picture and you keep your head down and you only see this little forest fire in front of you, like it's the whole forest, you will always make bad choices and you will regret them. I think that's the advice I would give myself. Try to help myself have more perspective about how to make that very difficult choice, about when to sacrifice something meaningful in your personal life for something in your business that's worth it, and when not to, and when to really spend time with your family and let the business work its way through the challenge.
Balance. That's balance in your life. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
That's wonderful. Andrew, thank you very much for being part of IMS. I enjoyed tremendously this interview. I have learned a couple things myself. Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with a tip or an advice?
You know what? I have one thing I want to leave them with that I think will pull a thread through everything we talked about.
Sure.
And that is that I think, most of us in the West get trained, at least in the US. I don't know if it's so much true in Central and South America. I'm not an expert enough to speak on this, but in America and Canada, it's definitely true. We get trained to think that decisions are about pros and cons, strategies, and cognitive things, and kind of figuring out the best things to do. And what gets underemphasized that is so important, that takes us all the way back to where you started the whole thing off, because I really think you're onto something, this thing about heartfelt, is that there's a wisdom in human emotion.
Yes.
And all human decisions are made emotionally anyway, and then they're justified after the fact. So if you can get really good at getting clear about what you're feeling about something, you will tend to make much smarter decisions versus trying to force a decision through a logic-only filter to see what makes logical sense. Because sometimes the right decision doesn't make a lot of logical sense, but somehow it's right. So if I could leave people with one thing, it would be learn how to get clear and trust that inner knowing you have of what the right next action is for you to take.
Awesome. Andrew, thank you very much for being part of IMS. Look forward to continue my relationship with you.
I agree. Same here. I can't wait for the next steps for us, and I hope everyone.
Thanks for listening to Insight Marketing Success,
Thank you for your time.
where marketing knowledge meets real-world experience from vision to execution.